The morning rush at Café Mira was louder than usual, filled with clattering dishes and murmured conversations. Hannah moved between tables with quiet precision, balancing trays of coffee and pastries as sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows. Her uniform was simple, her hair tied neatly back, her eyes steady. She had learned to move through chaos like a ghost, unnoticed, efficient, invisible. That illusion shattered when the door opened, and a man in a sharp grey suit stepped in. His presence drew eyes immediately. Confident stride, expensive watch, that aura of power that made others step aside without thinking. Mr. Daniel Kwon, CEO of one of Seoul's largest tech firms, didn't look like someone who belonged in a small cafe. He didn't even glance at the menu. "Americano, hot, now," he said without looking up from his phone. Hannah nodded, her voice soft. "Yes, sir." She turned, made the coffee, and returned to his table. But as she placed the cup down, someone behind her bumped her shoulder. The hot liquid splashed across the table and onto his sleeve. The cafe went silent. Daniel stood slowly, eyes narrowing, his tone cutting like ice. "Do you have any idea?" He stopped mid-sentence. His gaze had fallen to her wrist, where the edge of her sleeve had pulled back, revealing a small, faded tattoo. A simple symbol. A blue lotus. For a second, his composure cracked. His phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Hannah froze, heart racing, not understanding his expression. To her, it was just another accident. But to him, that symbol wasn't random. It was identical to the one his late sister used to wear. The one from the orphanage she never left. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears as he stared at the tiny tattoo. The world around him blurred. The hum of the cafe, the clinking of cups, the curious stares. None of it existed anymore. Only that symbol did. That small blue lotus that used to peek from beneath his sister's bracelet when they were children. He remembered the day she got it, a childish sketch inked by a friend at the orphanage before he was adopted by the Kwon family. He had promised to find her someday, but he never did. The fire that burned down the orphanage erased everything, or so he thought. Hannah quickly grabbed napkins, apologizing softly. "I'm so sorry, sir." "I didn't mean," he interrupted, his voice trembling slightly. "Where did you get that tattoo?" She froze, surprised by the question. "This? I've had it since I was little. It's all I remember from before the orphanage burned down." His breath caught. The air between them thickened with something unspeakable. Recognition, disbelief, guilt. Daniel stepped back, his mind racing. Could it be her? The one he lost? The girl whose laughter still echoed in his nightmares? No, it couldn't. She would have been gone like the others, but then she lifted her gaze, and for a fleeting second, he saw it. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. Before he could speak, the cafe manager rushed over, apologizing profusely. "Mr. Kwon, we'll clean this up right away." Hannah bowed deeply, her hands shaking. Daniel turned and left without another word. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks of grey and blue. His reflection in the window looked like a man staring into the past, one he thought he'd buried forever. Daniel didn't go back to the office that day. Instead, he drove without direction through the rain-washed streets, headlights cutting through the mist. His mind spun with fragments of memories he'd spent years burying, the sound of fire cracking, the smell of smoke, the desperate cries echoing through the orphanage halls. He had been only 10 when they were separated. The Kwons adopted him the week before the tragedy, while his little sister stayed behind. He had begged to bring her, but they said one child was enough. He had promised her he would return. But when the fire consumed everything, all that remained was a charred photograph and that symbol, the blue lotus. For years, he carried it as a scar of guilt, the proof of a broken promise. Now, it had reappeared, on the wrist of a waitress. At his penthouse, Daniel stood before the large glass window overlooking the city, his reflection hollow. He poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. His assistant, Minho, called about a meeting with investors. Daniel ignored the call. His hand trembled slightly as he scrolled through his contacts, searching for anything tied to the orphanage's old records. But everything was gone, erased or sealed after the fire investigation. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, Hannah's eyes reflecting that same fragile innocence. He tried convincing himself it was coincidence, yet deep down, he knew fate didn't play games like this. By dawn, he made a decision. He would return to Cafe Mira, not as a CEO this time, but as a man haunted by the past, searching for the truth buried beneath ashes and time. The next morning, Hannah tried to shake off the unease from the previous day. She had spilled coffee before. Accidents happened, but something about the man's reaction haunted her. The way his voice faltered, the shock in his eyes when he saw her wrist. It wasn't anger, it was recognition, and that frightened her more than any insult could. She tied her apron and stepped into the cafe, pretending nothing had happened. Yet her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the pastries. The bell above the door chimed, and instinctively she looked up. Her breath caught. Daniel Kwon was back. He looked different today. No phone in hand, no bodyguards, no arrogance. Just a man in a dark coat, expression unreadable. He walked to the counter and spoke softly. "Can we talk?" Hannah hesitated, glancing at her manager. When he nodded, she led Daniel to a quiet corner. Her voice was cautious. "If this is about yesterday, I already—" "It's not," he interrupted gently. "I just need to ask you a few things about your past." Her brows furrowed. "My past?" He nodded, searching her face as if each feature was a missing piece of a puzzle. "You said you were at the orphanage before the fire." Hannah's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" He hesitated. "Because I was there too, before I was adopted." The silence stretched between them. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside, time seemed suspended. She studied his face, searching for truth, while his heart pounded with hope and fear. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the ground beneath him shift, as if fate had decided the past wasn't finished with either of them. Hannah's fingers twisted the edge of her apron as she tried to process what he'd just said. "You were there, at the orphanage." Her voice trembled between disbelief and curiosity. Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "A long time ago, before the fire, I was adopted a week before it happened. My sister—" He stopped, his throat tightening around the word. "She didn't make it out, at least that's what I was told." Hannah looked down at her wrist, tracing the faint lines of the lotus tattoo. "I don't remember much," she said quietly. "I woke up in a hospital after the fire. They said there were no records of my family. I didn't even know my real name." Daniel's breath caught again. That small, fragile voice, it was like hearing an echo from another life. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old, worn photograph. The edges were burned, the image faded, but it showed two children standing side by side, both smiling shyly at the camera. A young boy and a girl holding hands. The girl wore a small blue lotus drawn on her wrist. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. "That's me," she whispered, her eyes glistening. Daniel's hand trembled as he placed the photo on the table. "And that's me." The cafe noises faded into silence around them. Hannah stared at the image, then at the man before her. Older, harder, but with the same eyes. Tears welled up as the realization settled in like dawn, breaking through fog. She wasn't alone anymore. After all these years, the boy she thought had forgotten her had been searching too, and fate had finally led them back to the same place. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of lost years filled the silence, everything unsaid between them stretching across the table like invisible threads. Hannah brushed her fingers over the photograph again, as if touching the past could make it real. "I thought no one survived," she whispered. "They told me everyone in my dormitory was gone." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I searched for years, Hannah, every record, every report, but the fire erased everything. They said all the children's files were destroyed and the survivors were relocated under new names." She looked up, startled. "Hannah, that's not my real name," she admitted softly. "They gave it to me at the hospital. I never knew what came before." Daniel exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and sorrow. "You were Minseo," he said, his voice trembling. "Minseo Kwon. You loved drawing flowers on the walls, and you used to tell me you'd open a garden when we grew up." Her eyes filled with tears. "That name, it feels familiar." The sound of it unlocked something deep within her, a warmth and ache that had been asleep for years. Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "But there's more. That fire, it wasn't an accident." Hannah blinked. "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice. "My adoptive father, Chairman Kwon, funded the orphanage. There were rumors about money laundering and illegal adoptions. When the investigation started, the orphanage burned down days later." Hannah's heart pounded. "You think someone wanted to erase the evidence?" Daniel nodded slowly. "And now that I've found you, I need to know who caused it. For both of us." For the first time, she saw it in his eyes. Not the cold CEO, but the brother she had lost, burning with the need for truth. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse office, the city lights flickering below like dying stars. The revelation had opened an old wound, one that pulsed with both guilt and fury. His adoptive father's empire had built its reputation on innovation and philanthropy, yet beneath it all, there were whispers of corruption, of dark deals sealed behind charity smiles. He scrolled through decades of archived reports, internal memos, and legal documents. Most were redacted, entire pages blacked out. But one detail caught his eye: a transfer of funds from the Kwon Foundation to an unregistered youth facility just days before the fire. The same date appeared in a forgotten audit report he'd stumbled upon years ago. His hands clenched into fists. His father's signature was on it. Meanwhile, Hannah walked home through the quiet streets, the cold wind biting at her cheeks. The weight of truth pressed on her chest. She could barely reconcile the arrogant man from yesterday with the broken soul she saw today. And yet, she felt an inexplicable sense of safety around him, as if some invisible thread had reconnected their lives after years of silence. When she reached her small apartment, she opened a box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were a few burnt trinkets, a melted locket, a charred diary, and a scrap of paper with a faded name, Kwon. Her heart skipped. She traced the letters, tears blurring her vision. At that same moment, Daniel picked up his phone. He called Minho. "I need everything you can find on the orphanage fire, old police files, private reports, anything tied to the Kwon Foundation." Minho hesitated. "Sir, that could mean going against your father." Daniel's voice hardened. "Then it's time someone finally did." 2 nights later, Minho arrived at Daniel's office carrying a plain black folder. His usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by unease. "You didn't get this from me," he said quietly, placing it on the desk. "These files were sealed by your father's legal team 20 years ago." Daniel opened the folder slowly. Inside were photographs, grainy, taken before the fire. Children in uniforms, the orphanage building, a few staff members. He froze when he saw one image in particular, a small girl with a blue lotus drawn on her wrist, standing beside a man in a suit. The man was his father. What was he doing there? Daniel muttered. Minho hesitated. According to the file, the orphanage was part of a placement initiative run by the Kwan Foundation, but there are reports of falsified adoption papers, children taken overseas, sold to private families under fake identities. Daniel's stomach turned. He flipped through the documents, financial transfers, altered birth certificates, hospital records marked as lost. It was all there. Proof that the fire wasn't a tragedy. It was a cover-up. Meanwhile, across town, Hannah sat on her small bed, holding the charred diary she'd found in her box. Most pages were unreadable, but one line remained intact. If something happens, remember the lotus, and trust your brother. She pressed it against her chest, trembling. She didn't need more proof. Her heart already knew. The next morning, she arrived at Daniel's office unannounced. When he saw her, he stood silently, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Without a word, she handed him the diary. "I think it's time we face the truth together," she said softly. He nodded. "Then we start today." And for the first time, they weren't alone in their search. Daniel and Hannah stood in the marble lobby of Kwan Industries, the air heavy with tension. She clutched her small handbag, trying to steady her breath. It was her first time stepping into a building that radiated so much power, but all she could feel was unease. The logo above the reception desk, the same name responsible for their pain, seemed to stare back at her like an accusation. Daniel led her toward the private elevator. "We'll start with my father's archives," he said quietly. "They're on the top floor. No one touches them but him." When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a dimly lit corridor lined with glass offices and old portraits. The silence was thick. At the end of the hall, behind frosted glass doors, was a room labeled Chairman Kwan, Confidential. Daniel used his key card. The lock clicked. Inside, everything was immaculate. Polished wood, the faint scent of cigars, and a single photograph on the desk. Daniel as a boy, standing beside the man who had raised him. Hannah's eyes moved to a metal cabinet in the corner. "That's where you think the truth is?" He nodded. "If the files survived, they'll be there." He forced the drawer open. Inside were folders stamped orphanage report and fire investigation. As he flipped through them, one envelope slipped free, sealed and addressed to him. His name written in his father's familiar handwriting. He tore it open. The first line froze his blood. "Daniel, if you're reading this, you've found what I did. You must understand. I did it to protect you." Hannah stared at him, her heart pounding. "Protect you from what?" Daniel swallowed hard. "From the truth of who started that fire." Daniel's hand shook as he unfolded the rest of the letter. His father's neat handwriting ran across the yellowed paper, every word striking like a blade. "The fire was never meant to kill anyone," it read. "But when the investigators came too close, they threatened to expose the illegal adoptions. I paid men to erase the evidence. They acted without mercy. I didn't know children were still inside until it was too late." Daniel's stomach twisted. His father's empire, his legacy, everything he had built his life around, had been born in fire and silence. Hannah's voice was a whisper. "He confessed?" Daniel nodded slowly, unable to speak. The words blurred as he kept reading. "The board knows nothing. But if you uncover this, destroy the evidence. The world doesn't forgive sins committed for survival." He dropped the letter on the desk, his chest heaving. He destroyed families. He destroyed ours. Hannah picked up the pages gently, her eyes shimmering with tears. "And now you can end it," she said softly. "You can make it right." Daniel looked at her, the sister he had lost, now standing before him as his moral compass. "If I go public, it'll take down everything. The company, the foundation, even my position." "Then maybe that's justice," she replied. "Not revenge, justice." Her calmness steadied him. For the first time, the CEO mask slipped completely. He wasn't a businessman anymore. He was a brother who had just found the truth buried under decades of lies. He folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then, "We finish this together." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the city, as if the sky itself knew that the reckoning had finally begun. The following morning, Daniel walked into the boardroom of Quan Industries with Hannah by his side. The room fell silent. Executives who once bowed before him now watched in confusion as he placed a single folder on the polished table. The envelope with his father's confession lay inside. "I called this meeting," Daniel began, his voice steady but cold, "because it's time you all know what this company was built on." Murmurs filled the room. One director, Mr. Han, frowned. "Sir, if this is about financial restructuring, it's about truth," Daniel interrupted. "And about the fire that destroyed the Blue Lotus orphanage 20 years ago." The room froze. Several faces went pale. Hannah stood quietly behind him, her hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the floor. Daniel opened the folder and began reading aloud from his father's letter. Every word echoed through the sterile space like thunder. The executives listened in stunned silence, some horrified, others visibly shaken. When he finished, Daniel closed the folder. "These crimes were covered up for decades. My father may be gone, but I won't continue his silence. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO. The foundation's assets will be redirected to compensate the surviving victims." Mr. Han stood, anger trembling in his voice. "Do you realize what this means? You'll destroy the Quan name." Daniel met his gaze. "Then it's about time it was destroyed." He turned to Hannah, who looked at him through tears. For the first time, she saw her brother free, stripped of power, yet more human than ever. As they walked out together, the heavy doors of the boardroom closed behind them. The empire of lies had finally begun to crumble, and with it, the past that had chained them both. Weeks passed since Daniel's resignation made headlines. The story of the orphanage fire and the Quan Foundation's hidden crimes shook the nation. Shares plummeted, politicians distanced themselves, and the once untouchable Quan legacy turned into a symbol of corporate repentance. But for Daniel, it wasn't about headlines. It was about redemption. He spent his days visiting the remaining survivors of the orphanage, helping rebuild a new shelter under a new name, the Blue Lotus Home. Hannah managed most of it, her quiet strength grounding everything they did. The children there reminded them both of who they once were, lost souls searching for warmth in a cold world. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the windows, Daniel stood by the garden where Hannah was planting flowers. Blue lotuses bloomed across the pond, their petals shimmering in the light. He watched her kneel beside a group of laughing children and felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Hannah looked up, smiling faintly. "You finally did it," she said. "You kept your promise." Daniel approached slowly. "I broke so many before. I needed to make this one count." She brushed the dirt from her hands. "Do you think we can ever forgive him?" Daniel paused, gazing at the horizon. "Maybe not, but forgiveness isn't for him. It's for us, so we can move on." They stood in silence, watching the flowers sway gently in the wind, symbols of rebirth rising from the ashes of their past. As children's laughter echoed through the garden, Hannah whispered, "The lotus blooms even in the mud." Daniel smiled softly. "And that's where we began." He looked at her wrist, the faint tattoo glinting in the sunlight, no longer a mark of pain, but of survival.